From losing over $15 million to mining more gold than he had ever seen in his life, Parker Schnabel just made gold rush history. Let's dive in. Before Parker Schnabel ever stepped foot on Dominion Creek, he was already riding the momentum of one of the strongest mining seasons of his entire career. His crew had just finished pulling over 8,000 ounces of gold from the ground, a haul that at the time was worth somewhere around $14 million, and every bit of it had come from the familiar terrain of Scribner Creek. That kind of number wasn't just impressive. It was a clear message that Parker was still one of the sharpest operators in the game, running a tight crew with little waste and maximum efficiency. Through that season, everything seemed to click. The wash plants, Big Red and Slucifer, barely had time to cool down between runs. And week after week, the gold just kept coming. But Parker isn't the kind of miner who gets comfortable. And while the team was hitting big, he knew the ground they were working wouldn't last forever. Years of digging had stripped Scribner of its easy gold, and what remained was harder, thinner, slower to reach. If he wanted to stay ahead, to keep the gold flowing and the operation growing, he needed new ground, big ground, something proven, something that could produce on the same level or even higher. 10 miles northeast of Parker's old claims, Dominion Creek is 7,500 acres. It's a huge slice of historically gold-rig ground. That's when Dominion Creek entered the conversation. A massive stretch of land believed to still hold over $160 million worth of placer gold. And while that number sounded promising, the buy-in was steep. The asking price was a cold $15 million. A serious investment even for someone with Parker's track record. But with Scribner nearing the end of its run and the clock ticking on how long Parker's operation could stay this sharp, the risk felt necessary and the reward, if real, could shape the rest of his mining future. And after such a strong season, the pressure was on. Could Parker keep the momentum going and mine even more gold? Or was this new claim going to be a $15 million mistake? Buying Dominion Creek was never just about expansion for Parker. It was a massive risk that could either secure his future or sink him completely. Because while the land had a history of giving up millions in gold, it came with a price tag of $15 million. A figure that would scare off most miners who didn't have the kind of vision Parker had grown into over the years. To him, this was more than a patch of dirt. It was a shot at long-term survival in an industry that could break even the toughest crews if the ground dried up. And with Scribner Creek's best pay already picked clean, Parker had no choice but to look ahead. You mine really well and you'll make a go of it. Okay, let's do it. Thank you. Congratulations. So, when he signed on the dotted line for Dominion, he knew he wasn't just buying a claim. He was stepping into a whole new battlefield where failure would come fast and hard if the gold didn't show up. But as soon as the deal closed, reality started punching back because Dominion Creek with all its promise was a logistical nightmare from day one. A far cry from the routine and familiar grind of Scribner. And now Parker was stuck with rough terrain, endless mud, and a layout that demanded entirely new roads, fresh wash plant setups, and longer hauls that ate through fuel and patience like nothing he'd seen before. Nothing came easy, and every hour lost to breakdowns or confusion meant thousands slipping away from Parker's already thin margin. Even when they started slewing, he still pushed harder, ordering Roxanne's feed rate to be increased by 20% in a bold attempt to claw back time and cash. Alex went along without protest because everyone knew more dirt might mean more gold, and more gold might mean a shot at making this gamble worth it, even if the claim itself seemed determined to fight them every step of the way. But then something unexpected happened. Yet this was not the only breakdown. One week it was a broken conveyor belt. The next it was a jammed feeder or a pump giving out. Every breakdown meant lost hours. And in this gold mining business, time is literally money. And the crew was feeling the pressure, too. This wasn't familiar ground, and that meant longer hours, harder work, and more stress, adding to the weight of it all. Several crew members were brand new to the operation. And though a few had worked with Parker before, none of them were prepared for how difficult this claim would be. Everything seemed to resist them at every turn. From the stubborn ground to the equipment failures and endless mud. And while the crew focused on just getting through the day, Parker carried the crushing pressure of a $15 million investment that refused to pay off. With the gold barely coming in, the nightmare only grew darker. Even though Dominion Creek carried a reputation built on years of rich pay and proven success, the truth on the ground was far more brutal. Gold, no matter the history, doesn't always reveal itself when you need it most. And in those first few weeks, what Parker faced was a series of bitter disappointments. Test cuts that were supposed to show promise came back nearly empty, burning through fuel, chewing up hours, and leaving them with piles of worthless dirt that barely covered the cost of moving it. And when the skies opened up and the heavy rains hit, the higher elevation of Dominion Creek turned every road into thick mud that swallowed haul trucks, wrecked equipment, and drained morale with every slipping tire and broken part. The weather punished them without mercy, stretching the crew to the limit. And while millions had already been poured into the ground, all Parker had to show for it was a nightmare slowly unfolding into a financial disaster. But then something unexpected happened. From dirt to gold. After weeks of machines failing, tempers running thin, and nothing but disappointment in the SLES box, the pressure crushing Parker's crew began to shift when they opened up a fresh cut deep beneath the surface. A place that had taken far too much time and far too much fuel to reach, but carried with it the last flicker of hope they had. No one could say for sure if it would pay, but the moment that dirt hit the wash plant, something changed, and the water running through the SLES box began to shine with a different kind of light. Not just specks, but real gold. Thick enough to catch the eye and heavy enough to feel. It was the first solid color they had seen all season. The kind of rich pay dirt they had been chasing since day one. And instead of backing off, they locked in. They fine-tuned every angle of the plant and fed that layer over and over again until the gold just kept coming like it was being pulled out of a long hidden vein that no one had ever touched before. They had earned it through exhaustion and obsession. And for the first time in what felt like forever, even Parker let the tension slip from his face just enough to show the rare trace of a smile. Because he knew deep down that they might have finally found the zone that would pull them back from the edge. Inside Parker's Dominion Creek house, Chris Dumit suggested weighing the week's haul. Starting with his own plant, Sloofer. This plant had been running steady on Australia Creek for a full month, pulling in about 145 ounces every week. And this time it delivered 270.05 ounces worth over $540,000. Not long after, it was Parker's turn. Though Big Red had once been his biggest producer before Roxon took over. And despite the downtime spent on repairs, his team still brought in a staggering $453.80, almost $120,000 in a single day, pushing their total to $723.850 that week. It was the largest haul they had seen all season. A staggering pile of gold worth more than $1.4 million. For a moment, there was relief in the air, a fragile sense of satisfaction that barely covered the exhaustion etched into every face on the claim. But even as the gold poured into jars and buckets, the pressure still clung to them like smoke, because they were already deep into the season, far behind schedule, and every delay they had suffered still haunted the calendar. Yes, Dominion Creek had started to deliver at last. But after everything they had lost, after the breakdowns, the wasted fuel, and the quiet panic that built up with every passing week, no one could say whether this stroke of luck had come too late to make a difference. Parker knew that breaking even was already a mountain to climb, and beating last year's total would demand more than just grit. It would require pushing themselves and the machines past their limits without looking back. So they kept going non-stop, pushing the plant harder, feeding it load after load and chasing every speck of gold that could still be buried beneath the black dirt. Because even though they were winning now, the clock was always ticking louder. Week after week, they kept grinding forward through broken parts and foul weather, through aching backs and short tempers. And even though they had finally struck rich ground, the damage from earlier in the season still followed them, invisible, but heavy. Every ounce mattered now. Every run could tip the scales. And when the gold was finally poured and weighed, the total they had been waiting for at last revealed itself. 566.0. It was a few thousand ounces less than last season's run. On paper, it looked like a step back. Less gold, less money. But here's the twist. Every single ounce came from brand new ground. That's what made it a win. And thanks to Big Red's massive final haul, Parker was past his original season's goal early. Yet, this is not the first time Parker has turned things around. Parker hits a jackpot. At another mining operation, Parker and his crew had stumbled onto what felt like a dream buried in the earth. An abandoned mine no one had touched in years. Here, rich veins of gold sat hidden behind rotting timbers and thick layers of dust, as if time itself had forgotten the place. It looked like whoever had worked at last had fled in a hurry, leaving behind not just tools and equipment, but pure untouched treasure that glittered in the shadows and begged to be taken. They wasted no time, tearing into the earth with urgency, dragging out gold at a pace that didn't seem real. But with every inch they dug, something changed. Odd symbols carved into rock, rusted gear not meant for mining, and cold air that never moved, began to surround them, warning them quietly. And Parker, too focused on the gold to care, pushed deeper into something that had clearly never wanted to be found. Then they found it. Something that changed everything. At first glance, the mine seemed like the ultimate jackpot. Thick veins of gold lined the rock walls, shining even in the dim light. There were no signs of old-school mining tools, no mercury contamination, just pure raw gold waiting to be taken. And Parker claimed every last bit without hesitation. But gold always comes at a price. What they uncovered wasn't just treasure. It was a mystery wrapped in danger. It reminded Parker of a story his grandfather once told him. One day, his grandpa had an unbelievable gold haul, 42 in a single day. But 4 hours later, everything changed. When the dust began to settle around them, something low and strange seemed to rise from deep within the earth. A sound that didn't belong to machines or men, as if the mine itself was waking up after years of silence. There were no fancy rigs or expensive drills this time, no frozen ground or roaring engines, just Parker's crew and the soft crumble of dirt giving way beneath their boots while a quiet creeping tension grew with every shovel. They thought it would be another lucky break, just fast digging with fast results. And at first it was, with over 100 g of gold pulled out in just a few hours, each piece shining like stolen time. And yet none of it felt right. The deeper they went, the more it became clear that someone had dug here before. And whatever they found had been enough to make them leave fast without packing, without warning, and without ever coming back. But while things were looking good for Parker, the same could not be said for everyone. Another miner in the area had been working tirelessly, desperate to hit the bedrock. He had poured everything he had into a single hole, a hole that kept swallowing money faster than it gave back gold. It was a high-stakes gamble, the kind Parker knew all too well as he watched closely, knowing how easily fortunes could flip from riches to ruin. But here's the kicker. When Parker's team went to clear the site, they realized this wasn't just an abandoned mine. It was a time capsule frozen in history. The rock formations didn't match modern geological maps. On top of that, the tools they found were too advanced for the time period, and something had been left behind, something more valuable than gold. Further downstream, men spent millions trying to strike gold, scooping dirt off the river banks like it was easy. But every scoop was either a step toward fortune or a reminder of how quickly things could go wrong. Parker had been in tight spots before, but this mine had a strange energy. It whispered of past miners who had tried and failed. Yet, despite the warnings, Parker's instincts told him to keep going, since, to him and his team, this felt like the ideal gold mine they had wanted all along. And because they were not sure why anyone could leave such a rich place in a hurry, the best thing they could do was mine the most as they figured out the rest. In the end, Parker shocked everyone's expectations when he walked away with over 2,500 ounces, a haul worth over $5 million.